Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning and happy Raksha Yatra also.
Good morning, sir. Same to you,
Good
sir.
morning. Good morning. So we'll start today from Unit 6 because we have already completed Block 1, Unit 5 up to Unit 5. Now in Unit 6, we have to read terms of payment and the objectives of this unit is uh, to explain various methods of payment in export business, then to discuss the implication in terms of risks and time under various methods, describe various types of letter of credit, then explain the documentation and related procedures covering realization of export procedure under various terms. So this is in short the objective of this unit. Now coming to 6.1, the introduction, let me tell you, always in business there will be competition, and it is also the same thing happens in export import trade. The competition in international trade today is no longer only in price. Usually competition means we think that the prices should be less from the customer's point of view and the prices should be more from the supplier's point of view or the seller's point of view. So in between, when there will be more number of suppliers, there will be more competition, the price has to come down. The sellers will have to reduce the price. But nowadays, in international trade, not only this price is coming to picture in competition, but also quality of the products and the delivery schedule, timing of delivery. Again, it extends to terms of payment also. What is this terms of payment? After how many days you are requiring the payment, or how many days you can live, say 2 months or 3 months, like that. So that is called terms of payment. Now we will discuss various methods of payments, then documentation and related procedures relating to realization of export proceeds. Because our aim is to have the proceeds of the exports, that is the sale proceeds. So these are the important things which we'll discuss now. Coming to terms of payment, for expanding the export business, terms of payment is very instrumental as we have discussed. It is involved with attracting foreign buyers. If the terms are good, acceptable to the foreign buyers, they will be interested to purchase. Okay. Payment terms are determined by a host of factors, not only one factor, but a host of factors such as exchange control regulations, trade practices, financial position of buyers, bargaining strength of the parties, etc. According to the exchange control regulations, the amount should be realized within 6 months from the date of shipment, except Bhutan and Nepal. In our case, we have to collect the proceeds within 6 months, but not in case of Bhutan and Nepal. Exports to Bhutan and Nepal, it may be more in these cases. There are 4 methods of receiving payments. So what are those 4 methods? First one is advance payment. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
The payment under this method made either at the time uh, of is acceptance of the order or at the time before shipment. There are 2 times. One is when we are accepting, when we are giving the offer and they have accepted it and we also agree to send, that is the acceptance period. Another period is at the time of just before shipment. So if everything has been done, shipment has not been done, then also payment will not be received in some cases. So there are two cases, or we can say two stages where we can expect our proceeds to be received. So this is the safest method. There are different methods although, so this is the safest method. Okay. Safest method, why? Because before the shipment, before sending the goods, if we get our payments, then naturally it is good. Here, this can be made by the buyer by purchasing a draft from the bank payable at a bank in India and dispatching it to the exporter, or arranging through his bank for a bank in India capable to pay the exporter by mail transfer or telegraphic transfer. Let me explain these two methods. First of all, purchasing a draft from the bank payable at a bank in India and dispatching it to the exporter. Now, if the importer is in UK or USA, then what he will have to do is, he will have to purchase one bank draft from the bank payable at a bank in India. From any bank there in USA, it can purchase, but it should be payable in India, in some bank, some branch in India. And then after purchasing that, they will have to, or he will have to send it to the exporter in India. This is one way. The second one is arranging through his bank. His means the exporter's bank. Arranging through exporter bank for a bank in India capable to pay the exporter by mail transfer or telegraphic transfer. That means if they can arrange through their banks, one bank in India to pay the exporter, who is capable to pay the exporter by either in way of mail transfer or telegraphic transfer. So first transfer you must have known, that can be also done. This is also cheapest as no commission or interest is payable by the Indian exporter. So this is cheapest because commission is not payable, neither interest is payable. Then documentary credit. We'll come to documentary credit, the second method, that is documentary credit. This is the oldest, sorry, this is the second best alternative method. That means when the first method is not applicable or is not possible, we can resort to another method, that is documentary credit. This is the second best alternative method available. According to this, the Uniform Customs and Practices, that is in short called UCP, relating to documentary credits, it is defined as any arrangement whereby a bank acting at the request and in accordance with the instructions of a customer, that is the importer, here the customer is the importer, undertakes to make payment to or to the order of a third party. Who is the third party? Bank is one party, importer is one party, and the exporter is the third party. A third party against stipulated documents and compliance with stipulated terms and conditions. So according to what? Let me explain this method, that there are certain documents by showing which the importer can get the possession of the goods. So these documents will have to be handed over to him only when he makes the payment. So that is that's why it is called documentary credit. As credit is given to the exporter on the basis of documents, this method is referred to as a system of payment through documentary credits. Now, who are the parties in the documentary credits? First party is importer, that is an applicant in terms of UCP. According to UCP, the importer is called an applicant. Number two is the banker, that is opening or issuing banker, the banker who will issue. Number three, the banker to whom the letter of credit is sent, namely advising banker. another banker will be involved who will issue the to whom the letter of credit will be sent. That means that is another intermediary. Then number 4 is confirming banker who undertakes to make the payment in case the issuing banker fails. If the issuing banker fails to pay, then some undertaking is given by this bank, that is confirming banker, that I will pay. In case of payment by bill of exchange, perhaps you know what is a bill of exchange. It is a credit instrument and enforceable by law also. In case of payment by bills of exchange, the paying bank on which such bills are drawn may be the issuing bank. The bank who will make the payment or meet the bill will be called the maybe the issuing bank. He will be the issuing bank. Then negotiating bank. If the paying bank is not in the country of the exporter, then naturally another negotiating bank will have to be appointed. Then last party involved is exporter, who is called the beneficiary. Then we will come to details included in letters of credit. So this letter of credit is one of the most important items or important documents, and now we have to one minute. Let me arrange this. Laptop is not working. Just a minute. And we have to finish these 4 units today, for 5 units. We have already discussed this one, documentary credit. Now we come to okay, documentary credit we have already finished. Now we'll be coming to this 6.4.2. Okay, here it is that. So details included in letters of credit. The documentary credit gives the following particulars, though the form and order may vary from bank to bank. So name of the issuing, the first thing is name of the issuing bank and type of credit with number and date on whose behalf the credit is issued, the applicant or the buyer, the amount including the currency, the date up to which the credit is valid, that the expiry date, Then since the beneficiary is usually required to draw a bill of exchange, normally referred to as a draft in documentary credits. Actually, before the acceptance, a bill of exchange is called a draft, referred to as a draft in documentary credits. The term of the draft, that is sight or usance. There are two types of drafts, at sight and for a particular period, 3 months or 2 months, like this. Whether the draft is to be drawn on a named bank or the buyer, then brief details of the goods. Then documents required, usually the documents are commercial invoice, packing list, insurance policy certificate, etc. All these things are there. Then port or ports of shipment and destination of shipment, only country's name may be written. Then price and terms of shipment, whether the term is FOB, C&F, CIF, which yesterday we were discussing. Then whether the part shipment and or transshipment is permitted, any other conditions applicable to the credit. Then certificate as the issuing bank's responsibility in the credit. That is, if the certificate is omitted, it may be implied from time of credit indicated, that is A above, irrecoverable or etc. Then last one is statement that the credit is subject to the provisions of the uniform customs and practices for documentary credits. So these are the things or the details included in a letter of credit. Now we'll come to the practical mechanism. So this is required for the sequence of procedures in a letter of credit. So here there are 9 points we have to see one by one. First of all, the buyer and the seller agree terms of sale, including payment by letter of credit. Second one will be the buyer issues an instruction to the issuing bank to issue the credit. The third one, the issuing bank instructs the advising or confirming bank, including specification of documents. We have read about this confirming bank and issuing bank, etc. in the parties involved. Then the advertising bank, the advising bank informs the beneficiary. The beneficiary means the exporter, of course. If he accepts the advice and is happy with it, arranges shipment. The seller obtains the bill of lading and the other required documents. He delivers them to the issuing, paying, accepting or negotiating bank, as the case may be. Then the bank checks the documents. If they are in accordance with the instructions from the issuing bank or the applicant, if the issuing bank is the paying bank, effects payments as appropriate. That means payment is released. If the paying bank is not the issuing bank, it sends the documents to the issuing bank. The issuing bank checks them again, and if they are correct, release them to the buyer upon payment of the amount of credit. The buyer uses the documents to get possession of the goods. Without this thing, he cannot possess the goods. Next one is different kinds of letters of credit. There are different types of or different kinds of letter of credit. So they are like this: revocable and irrevocable letter of credit. Revocable means which can be revoked later on, and irrevocable cannot be. Then confirmed letter of credit, restricted credits, revolving credit, red clause letter of credit, then transferable credit. There are so many. Then transferable credit, back-to-back letter of credit, standby credit, deferred payment credit, acceptance credit, negotiation credit. Like this, there are 16 types. This is up to 12. So now we'll go to 13. 13 is sight and usance credit. Sight, I have told you, according to the acceptance, that is called sight credit. When a letter of credit states that the payment will be made by the bank at site on demand or on presentation. Such credit is called site credit. However, drawing of a draft is not always needed. Payment can be made on presentation of specified documents under usance credit. Under usance credit, this is a different type of credit, letter of credit. Letter of credit calls for drawing drafts at a stated usance period. The period may be 30 days, 60 days, or 120 days, like this. So credit is also called term credit. This type of credit is also called term credit. Then fixed and revolving credit, under revolving credit, and transit credit. So these are the types of LC, that is letter of credit, and these are the different kinds of letter of credit. Now we'll come to documents required under letter of credit. So in order to prepare the letter of credit, what are the other documents to accompany it? Let us see that. In 6.4.5, you can go through all these type of letter of credit, and you can find out slight differences are there, how it is going to be made. Then documents required under letter of credit. Mainly there are 7 things which we have to read here. That is bill of exchange, the exporter sorry, draws a bill, or draft, you can say. When it is accepted, then it becomes a bill. Then second one is commercial invoice, document of content, details about the goods sold, prices, discount, etc. Everything is there. Then you have got packing lists. In the packing list, details of individual parcels, and if there are various packets, regarding those packets, what is there in packet number 1, packet number 2, like this, that will be given. Then transport documents. Transport documents will contain bill of lading issued by shipping company. In case of airways, it is airway bill, or railway receipt in case of your inland transport. Then truck challan, etc. if it is by vehicles. Sorry, these documents are accepted as proof of shipment. So when the shipment is done, usually these documents are achieved, and they prove, they act as a proof of shipment. Then number 5 is inspection certificate. Inspection certificate, regarding inspection certificate, we have read regarding the quality and inspection, etc. So that certificate. Then insurance policy certificate. It contains a declaration of value of each shipment signed by the exporter. Then other documents are also there, that is certificate of origin, analysis and weight certificate, health and sanitary certificate if it is required, and these are to be submitted to the negotiating bank along with the letter of credit. Then we'll be coming to guidelines for the exporters. What are the guidelines for the exporters? As stated earlier, payment under letter of credit is available only if the exporter has tendered correct documents that we have discussed. These documents are carefully scrutinized first by the negotiating banker in the exporting country before he makes payments to exporters. The issuing banker in the importer's country also scrutinizes it before reimbursing the negotiating banker. Any discrepancy in document can lead to delays in payment. Quite often, documents are rejected on first presentation because they are either incomplete or incorrect. So both have to be avoided. It should not be incomplete. All the necessary data should be there, and incorrect also will make it responsible for rejection. So it is better to make it correct. Some of the typical errors are like this: the letter of credit had expired, the bill of lading was claused, that means unclean or dirty. There are many clauses for that, etc. So in this way, These are to be avoided. Then there are 18 errors. These are the errors. The letter of credit had expired, the bill of lading was closed, a charter party bill of lading was presented when letter of credit called on board shipment. The goods were shipped on dock when it was not permitted. Shipment was made between the ports other than those stated in the letter of credit. Suppose in the letter of credit we have given one, but from another port we are making the shipment. It is not good. It is an error. Then number 6 is insurance cover was inadequate and expressed in a currency other than the required by the letter of credit. Then the description or spelling of goods or on invoice differed from that in the letter of credit. It should be equal. Both should be equal. The amounts of value shown on the invoice and bill of exchange differed. The amount should be again same. The drawing was for less than the letter of credit amount when part shipment were not permitted. Then the bill of lading did not evidence whether freight was paid or not. The shipment was short. The bill of exchange was drawn on wrong party. The bill of exchange was payable on indeterminable date. That means a date which is not there. The bill of lading, insurance documents, or bill of exchange were not endorsed correctly. The endorsement should be also correctly made. The copy of the freight account was not attached when called for the letter of credit. There was an absence of signature of witness when required on document presented. The facsimile signature were used when not allowed. Facsimile signatures are not allowed. You have to put your own signature. So in view of such common errors, it is necessary to read the letter of credit very carefully and check the terms against the contract of sale. It is fundamental to check that the letter of credit is of the type agreed. That means just to eradicate all these errors, these are the steps to be taken. Check that the letter of credit, there are 4 points are there. These are the 4 points. One is it is of the type agreed, then it has an expiry date that is sufficiently far ahead for the goods to be shipped and the required documents obtained and presented in time. Then it has terms and conditions that can be met, and that is that the required documents can be obtained exactly as called for. Then it has correct spelling and misspellings should be taken up immediately with the buyer. So these are the 4 things which are done in order to eradicate those errors. Now I'll be coming to uh, 6.5, that is forms of documentary credit. Forms of documentary credit. There are 2 types of credit, side credit and acceptance credit, as we have already discussed. Then documentary credit may be issued in the form of side credit and acceptance credit. Let us discuss them in detail. Now coming to documents against payment, that is 6.5.1. It states that the exporter is willing to ship the goods before payment. However, he does not allow the buyer to take possession of goods before the buyer has paid. Let me explain this point again because this is very important. These documents against payment states that the exporter is willing to ship the goods even the payment has been received by him, but he will not allow the buyer or the importer to take possession of the goods before the buyer has paid. I can send the goods by the time I have not received the payment, okay, but by the time you receive the goods, you have to make the payment first before that. The exporter draws a bill of exchange on the buyer payable at site. This bill is handed over to his bank together with title to goods in the form of commercial invoices, packing list, marine insurance policy, bill of lading or airway bill, etc. So these are the documents to accompany that. These documents are to be given to the importer only upon payment of the bill. And until and unless he achieves these things, he gets these things in hand, he cannot take away the goods. Therefore, upon the payment of the bill only, this will be handed over to him. These bills are presented through a bank in the importer's country. The amount is realized and remitted to the exporter's bank account. So here we have to read one more thing. Arising from possible delays in remittances from the buyer because of shortage of foreign exchange in his country. Incidents of such risk can, however, be minimized by taking recourse to an export credit insurance policy. So this can be avoided by this. This can be treated like this. Now we'll be coming to documents against acceptance. That is in 6.5.2, documents against acceptance. So this is the second method. So under this method, the exporter draws a time bill on the importer. What is a time bill? Just like side bill, not unlike the side bill, here what happens? The time bill will be for a particular period. So under this method, the exporter draws a time bill on the importer. Process here is same, excepting that the exporter not only receives the goods before payment, but is prepared to wait even after the buyer has taken the delivery of goods. That means he is waiting still more. The exporter is ready to wait still more until the delivery of goods is made to the importer. The bank, however, does not hand over the documents till the exporter writes accepted. So that deal has to be accepted, and then only the documents will be given to the importer and puts his signature on the bill. After a period allowed like 30 days or 60 days or 120 days, etc., on the due date, the bill is presented for payment and the amount remitted to exporter. This involves several risks, that is credit risk, transfer risk, exchange risk, etc. What are these type of risks? Credit risk means he may be declared insolvent, the importer may be declared insolvent. In that case, money cannot be collected. So you have to ensure that. Similarly, transfer risk, if he does not accept it, it will have to be transferred to some other buyer in that country. Then exchange risk rate. Exchange risk means if the foreign exchange reserve is less in that country, maybe we'll be not getting it immediately. So they should be insured in order to get rid of this risk. Now we'll come to 6.6, that is open account with provisions for periodic settlement. Sales on open account are settled through periodic remittances to the exporter. Periodic remittance means every month or every year or every 6 months, some amount will be given. But this is possible only when there are many transactions taking place between two parties, the exporter and the importer. Just like if you are known to somebody, or if you are dealing with somebody for a number of months or years, for a long time, then that belief comes. So with that belief, it is done. It is possible only when the exporter has sufficient financial strength and they have good relation for a long time. But it requires special permission from Reserve Bank of India, RBI in India. Then we'll come to shipment on consignment basis. I hope you understand what is consignment. Consignment works like this. The seller, or you can say the exporter will send the goods. The importer will receive the goods, not as a purchased good, but as consignment, and will sell it. It may take some months to sell the product, and the sale proceeds then will be remitted to the exporter. This is consignment basis. So here, shipment on consignment basis, let us read this one. Shipment on consignment basis implies that goods are sent to the importer on the understanding that the latter will sell the goods and remit the sale proceeds. As I have explained, importer in most cases is either the exporter's own agent or certain marketing agencies who undertake to sell the goods on commission basis. So what they will get? They will get some commission. A typical example of such sale is export of tea to UK. So Indian exporters sent tea to UK importers who are nothing but the agents in London, where it is sold through periodic auctions and the sale proceeds is remitted back to the exporter. So this is another way, that is shipment on consignment basis. So these are the things which we have to read in Unit 6. Okay, the next thing is we are switching over to another unit, that is Unit 7. Unit 7 will describe exchange control regulations and facilities concerning exports. We'll go to that. So here the objectives of this unit is to define foreign exchange, to explain the objectives of exchange control, to describe an overview of Foreign Exchange Management Act 1999, that is your FEMA, then explain the foreign exchange regulation concerning exports, describe the procedure of various export declaration forms, discuss other provisions related to export. Now coming to the introduction, exchange control refers to the rules and regulations designed to regulate transactions involving foreign exchange. It is required when the country's external reserves are not adequate for meeting its current and potential requirements. We will discuss the objectives of exchange control and various provisions of Foreign Exchange Management Act 1999. Okay, so 7.2 foreign exchange. It means foreign currency. It includes three things. This foreign exchange or foreign currency includes all deposits, credit, and balances payable in foreign currency. Number two, any drafts, travelers' checks, letters of credit, and bills of exchange expressed or drawn in Indian currency but payable in any foreign currency. And three, any instrument payable at the option of the drawing or holder thereof or any other party thereto, either in Indian currency or foreign currency, or partly in one and partly in the other. It can be partly also. Foreign exchange accrues out of foreign exchange transactions. That means import and export. The regulation and control of foreign exchange implies, therefore, regulation and control of foreign exchange transactions. So here, there are four broad objectives let us cover that. Foreign exchange transactions, what is foreign exchange transaction? Then exchange control, etc. Then we come to objectives, that is foreign exchange. Your 7.3 is objective of exchange controls. That one will read. So actually there are 4 objectives of this foreign exchange control. So there, number 1, to prevent flight of capital. Capital should not run away. Number 2, to ensure the availability of sufficient foreign exchange for specific purposes such as meeting the international commitments. And number 3, to stabilize the external value and the domestic currency, and to insulate, the last one is to insulate the economy from external economic pressures. So these are the 4 objectives, or 4 broad objectives rather, of exchange control. Now we'll come to uh, 7.4, that is Foreign Exchange Management Act, or FEMA 1999. So the Foreign Exchange Management Act, or FEMA in short, 99, has been operationalized. The basic objective of this act is to consolidate and amend the law relating to foreign exchange with the objective of facilitating external trade and payments, and for promoting the orderly development and maintenance of foreign exchange markets in India. There are 7 chapters in this act. The first chapter deals with various definitions and scope of this act. Second one explains about the dealing, holding, transactions, realization and repatriation of foreign exchange. The third chapter discusses about the authorized persons and Reserve Bank's power related to the authorized person. Fourth chapter deals with the procedure of penalties and enforcement. Fifth chapter explains the procedure of adjudication and appeal. Chapter 6 deals with the Directorate of Enforcement power of search and seizure. The last 7th chapter explains the miscellaneous aspects of this act. So these are the Foreign Exchange Management Act. Now we'll come to regulation and management of foreign exchange. So it is dealt with in the second chapter. The second chapter of FEMA is very important for exporters and importers. It deals with various various provisions related to regulation and management of foreign exchange. There are 10 important things which we should read about this. First one is dealing in foreign exchange, etc. So this is given in 7.5. This is the first point, and then you have second point is holding of foreign exchange, etc. Number 3 is current account transactions. Number 4, capital account transactions. Number 5, a person resident in India may hold, own, transfer or invest in foreign currency, etc. Then number 6 is a person resident outside India may hold, own, transfer. That is regarding a person resident outside India, how he will deal with it. And number 7 is without prejudice to the provisions of this section, the RBI may by regulation prohibit, restrict or regulate establishment in India of a branch, office or other places of business by a person resident outside India. for foreigners, it is a restriction for carrying on any activity relating to such branch, office, or other places of business. And the 8th point is export of goods and services. Then you have got number 9, realization and repatriation of foreign exchange. That means how we'll realize foreign exchange by selling the goods, and how we'll repatriate. That means we have to give the foreign exchange at the time of we importing goods from outside. And the 10th point is exemption from realization and repatriation in certain cases. There are certain limitations. The exemptions may be granted in these cases. Okay. So this is regarding the regulation and management of foreign exchange. The next one is other provisions. That is, in addition to this or besides this, there are some other provisions also. So what are those other provisions? The other provisions, this includes foreign currency accounts, then agency commission, export claims, and other remittances. So let us read it in detail. Foreign currency accounts. Persons resident in India, including exporters, are allowed to open and maintain foreign currency accounts in or outside India. Exporters are permitted to maintain exchange earners foreign currency EEFC insert accounts in India. So they can open in our country some accounts, and we can also open in their country some accounts in order to facilitate the banking transactions. Foreign currency account outside India is also allowed by an exporter who is exporting goods on deferred payment term. Deferred payment means after some time the payment will be received, not immediately. That is called deferred payment. This facility is also extended to the turnkey project or civil construction contract abroad. Even civil contracts can be made, can be taken up by Indians to be carried on the work outside, that is in the foreign countries. The amount may be held or maintained in any currency other than the currency of India, Nepal, or Bhutan. So the currency should not be Indian or Nepal or Bhutan currency. This account may be maintained in the form of resident foreign currency account, exchange earners foreign currency account outside India, and other accounts. So these are the different types of accounts available for the exporter to open in foreign countries, and the importers also can do the same in the other country. Then coming to agency commission. There is no limit for payment of agency commission on exports. How much commission you have to give to your agents, it is not bound that it will be limited. The payments may be either by remittance or by deduction from invoice value. Suppose our invoice value is 5 lakh, but we have to give 1 lakh rupees as agent's commission. They will remit only 4 lakhs because that agent there will get the remaining 1 lakh. The payment may be either by remittance, we can send it, or they can deduct it from the invoice value. The application is to be sent by letter to an authorized dealer. The amount of commission need not even be declared on forms if there is valid agreement between exporter and overseas beneficiary. That because of these tax liabilities, etc., maybe some other reason also, it may not be disclosed or declared in the forms. Now coming to export claims. The limit on remittances in settlement of claims made by overseas buyers on account of compensation for non-fulfillment of contracts, shortage in weight or length, inferior quality of goods supplied, penalty for late shipment, etc., has been raised to 15% of the invoice value. That means this has gone up to 15% of the total invoice value, which is to be recovered. There is no limit for this amount. Application along with the dealers, with the details of shipment may be made to the authorized dealer. the application should be accompanied with the documentary evidence. Now coming to other remittances. These are agency commission, export claims, etc. Then we'll be coming to other remittances. So authorized dealers may effect on behalf of their exporter constituents remittances connected with exports like controlling charges, expenses incurred on dishonored, unaccepted bills, legal expenses related to trade disputes, testing charges, etc. Exporters are expected to submit supporting documents for these remittances. So coming to the next one, that is 7.7, export declaration forms. There are different forms. Simply you can go through these names of the forms. That is GR form, which will be prepared in duplicate. It is used to export to all countries other than Nepal and Bhutan. Then PP form, that will be also in duplicate. It is used to export to all countries other than Nepal and Bhutan by parcel post. Then subtext form in triplicate, it will be in triplicate. It is 3 copies you will have to make. It is used to export computer software in non-physical form. Then SDF form, the statutory declaration form or SDF is required in case of exports where shipping bills are electronically processed, electronically through systems. So procedure for furnishing these forms is given. Then we'll come to export of computer software. There is something regarding this. Export of computer software in physical form is done of GR or PP forms, not by the subtext. Subtext forms will be required for the software, non-physical. And then these are the various declaration, export declaration forms, GR form, PP form, subtext form, SDF form, etc. that we have already discussed. So this is regarding your unit 7. So what happens when in such type of online classes, there may be some doubts in your mind. So that you can ask me just after the class is over. So just write it down, and whatever doubts are there in certain terms or in certain procedures regarding some laws or regulations, etc., that you can ask me after the class, and I shall try to explain. Thank you. Then we'll be coming to unit 8, that is export finance. Coming to the objectives of this unit, that is export finance. This unit will be reading for describing the procedure of pre-shipment credit, to explain various types and procedure of post-shipment credit, to explain the role of Export-Import Bank of India, that is EXIM Bank, then describe the recent development in export finance. Okay, here, coming to the introduction part of it, export finance refers to the credit facilities extended to the exporters. So some credit facilities, you know, any business, if it is a bigger project, then naturally nobody starts with the entire amount of capital. Some capital may be contributed by us, but the remaining amount has to be taken as a loan, so that you can go for a big venture. So export finance refers to the credit facilities extended to the exporters. It includes loans for purchase, that is raw materials, etc., processing, that means converting into finished goods, manufacturing, and packing of goods meant for overseas markets. Here we will also discuss the role of Exim Bank. So coming to 8.2, that is institutional framework. This is like this: institutional framework for providing finance companies, Reserve Bank of India, Commercial Bank, Export-Import Bank of India, and Export Credit and Guarantee Corporation. One minute. Bank of India, being Reserve Bank of India, being the central bank of country, lays down the policy framework and provides guidelines for implementation. Finance short or medium term is provided exclusively by the Indian and foreign commercial banks, which are members of the Foreign Exchange Dealers Association. There is an association called Foreign Exchange Dealers Association. So any member, that means all the banks who are members of this association, can lend. The Reserve Bank of India functions as refinancing institution for short and medium term loans respectively, provided by commercial banks. The short and medium term loans respectively provided by commercial banks, then Export-Import Bank of India in certain cases. Let me make it clear. The Reserve Bank of India functions as refinancing institutions for short and medium term loans respectively, provided by commercial banks and Export-Import Bank of India. That means short-term loans will be given by the commercial banks and medium-term loans will be by the Export-Import Bank of India. In certain cases, participate with commercial bank in extending medium-term loan to exporters also. Then commercial banks provide finance at a concessional rate of interest and in turn are refinanced by the Reserve Bank, then or by the Export-Import Bank of India at a concessional rate. So if the interest rate will be less, it will be the loss of the bank, but that will be made good by getting those loans from Reserve Bank of India or from Exim Bank at a lower rate also. In case they do not wish to avail refinance, they are entitled for an interest rate subsidy. If they are not be refinanced, they will be getting some subsidy in way of interest rate. Export Credit and Guarantee Corporation, that is ECGC in short, also plays an important role through its various policies and guarantees, providing covers for commercial and political risks involved in export trade. So two types of risks, that is commercial and political. These two risks are to be compensated, are covered by this ECGC. Now we'll come to pre-shipment finance. It is provided to the exporter for purchase of raw materials, processing them and converting them into finished goods. They include these following things like packing credit, one is packing credit, then another is your advance against incentives, etc. Now coming to these things in detail, let me tell you. So far as the packing credit is concerned, the basic purpose of packing credit is to enable the eligible exporters to procure, process, manufacture, or store the goods meant for export. For all these activities, you need some credit. So that credit will be supplied for these purposes. Packing credit refers to any loan to an exporter for financing the purchase, processing, manufacturing, or packing of goods as defined by the Reserve Bank of India. It is a short-term credit against exportable goods. Now coming to this eligibility. Who can avail? Packing credit is available to all exporters, whether merchant exporter, export trading, star trading, superstar, tracing houses, and manufacturer exporter. Manufacturer of goods supplying to export trading, ST, that is star trading, SST, that is superstar trading houses, and merchant exporters are eligible for packing credit. All these persons are eligible for packing credit. The foreign buyer, through the medium of a reputed bank, gives the credit to eligible exporters for specified purpose against irrevocable letter of credit. It is also available against a confirmed or firm export order contract placed by the buyer for export of goods from India. So this is regarding that. Then a running account facility. The RBI has permitted banks to grant packing credit advances even without lodgement of letter of credit or firm order or contract under the scheme of running account facility. There, in case of packing credit, it is essential, either of these two. But here, without these two also, running account facility can be availed, subject to the following conditions. So what are the conditions? The conditions are the facility may be extended provided the need for running account facility has been established by the exporter to the satisfaction of the bank. The bank should be satisfied about that. Number two, the bank may extend this facility only to those exporters whose track record has been good. That means if someone is blacklisted, he is not going to get it. This is another condition. The third condition is letter of credit or firm order is produced within a reasonable period of time. Although it is not immediately done, but within a reasonable time, say 10 days or 15 days or 1 month, it has to be produced. For commodities under selective credit control, banks should insist on production of letter of credit or firm orders within 1 month from the date of sanction. Then the fourth condition is the concessive credit available in respect of individual pre-shipment credit should not go beyond 180 days. The maximum time allowed is 180 days. So this is all regarding your running account. Then coming to the amount. The loan amount is decided on the basis of export order and credit rating. Then period, maximum 180 days, as we have already discussed, from the date of disbursement can be extended by 90 days by RBI. That means 180 plus 90, 270 days. But for that, special permission of the Reserve Bank of India is necessary. Then rate of interest. Usually the rate of interest is very low than the normal rate. It is lower than the normal rate also, normal bank rate, provided the credit is extinguished by lodging the export bills on remittance from abroad. As soon as you will be getting the remittances from the importer, you will have to repay. If the exporter fails to do so, they would not be able to avail concessional rate of interest. Usual rate of interest will be levied on you. So that is regarding the rate of interest. Now we'll come to advance against incentives. The excess of cost of production over the FOB value is called incentive receivables, or we call it duty drawbacks. So this credit will be, advance. The excess of cost of production over the FOB value of the contract represents incentive receivable. For example, when the domestic price of goods exceeds the value of export orders, the difference represents duty drawback entitlement. Suppose here itself the cost is 5,000 rupees, but we are sending it for 4,000 rupees in order to earn foreign exchange. So the difference of 1,000 rupees is called duty drawback. So banks can grant advance against duty drawback. This 1,000 rupees loan they can give at pre-shipment stage, subject to the condition that the loan is covered by Export Production Finance Guarantee or Export Credit Guarantee Corporation, that is ECGC. This guarantee enables banks to sanction advances at the pre-shipment stage to the full extent of cost of production. The extent of cover and the premium are the same as for the packing credit guarantee. The rate is same. However, this will be for this purpose. Now we'll come to 8.3.3, that is pre-shipment credit in foreign currency. Here we'll be concerned with two important points. Two options are there rather. First one is the exporters may avail pre-shipment credit in rupees and then the post-shipment credit either in rupee or in foreign currency denominated credit or rediscounting of export bills. This is the first option. The second one is the exporters may avail pre-shipment credit in foreign currency and rediscounting of the export bills in foreign currency. Both will be in the foreign currency. Either of these two options you can exercise. Now we'll come to 8.4, that is post-shipment finance. So coming to post-shipment finance, it may be defined as, what is post-shipment finance? It may be defined as any loan or advance granted or any other credit provided by a bank to an exporter of goods from India from the date of extending the credit after shipment of goods to the date of realization of export proceeds. That means until the export proceeds are received, this will be available. It includes any loan or advance granted to an exporter on consideration of or on the security of any duty drawback or any cash receivables by way of incentives from the government. While granting post-shipment finance, banks are governed by the guidelines issued by the RBI, the rules of the Foreign Exchange Dealers Association of India, the Trade Control and Exchange Control Regulations, and the international conventions and codes of the International Chambers of Commerce. So these are the agencies whose rules will have to be followed by us. The exporters are required to obtain credit limits suitable to their needs. The quantum of credit depends on export sales and receivables. How much you are going to sell and how much you are expecting to get. Depending on that, these credit limits will be fixed. Then post-shipment finance is granted under various methods. The exporter may choose the type of facility as per his requirement. There are many, so you have to choose which is most suitable for you. The banks scrutinize the documents submitted for compliance of exchange control provisions, like the documents are drawn The documents are drawn in permitted currencies and payments receivable as permitted methods of payment. The relevant GRPP from duty certificate by the customs is submitted and particulars as stated in the GRPP form are consistent with the document standard as well as the sale contract, farm order, etc. or letter of credit. Then the documents are submitted within the time limit stipulated, and in case of delay, suitable explanation is required to be given. The period of issuance is in consonance with the time limit prescribed for realization of export process. You cannot extend it to any time limit. There is a time limit. Within that, you have to limit. Now, let us discuss various types of post-shipment finance. There are different types of post-shipment finances. Let us come to that. First one is negotiation of export documents under letter of credit. That is 8.4.1. Where the exports are under letter of credit arrangements, the banks will negotiate the export bills provided it is drawn in conformity with the letter of credit. If it is not in conformity with the letter of credit, this will not be sanctioned. When documents are presented to the bank for negotiation under letter of credit, they should be scrutinized carefully, taking into account all the terms and conditions of the credit. Otherwise, there will be errors for which it will be rejected. All the document standards should be strictly in accordance with the letter of credit terms. It is to be noted that letter of credit issuing bank undertakes to honor its commitment only if the beneficiary submits the stipulated documents. Even the slightest deviation from the from those specified in the letter of credit can give an excuse to the issuing bank for refusing the reimbursement of the payments that might have been already made by the negotiating bank. So this is very important that you have to always confirm whatever has been written in the letter of credit, and you should verify and re-verify it in order to avoid any error and therefore the harassment. Coming to 8.4.2, that is purchase or discount of foreign bills. So here, purchase or discount facilities in respect of export bills drawn under confirmed export contracts are generally granted to exporters who enjoy bill purchase or discounting limits sanctioned by the bank. It is not allowed for all, only for this stipulated class of people it will be necessary. As the security offered by the issuing bank under letter of credit arrangement is not available, the financing bank is totally dependent upon the credit worthiness of the foreign buyer. If the credit worthiness of the foreign buyer is good, then you can get it. The documents under the documents against payment, that is DP arrangements, are released through foreign correspondent only when payment is received. Whereas in the case of document against acceptance, there are two types of bills, one DP, another is DA bills. Documents are delivered to the overseas importers against acceptances of the draft to make repayment on maturity. Since the financing banks are open to the risk of non-payment, ECGC policies issued in favor of exporters and assigned to banks are insisted upon. Only that will have to be adhered, ECGC's policies. Then we'll come to advance against bills sent on collection. So post-shipment finance is granted against bills sent on collection basis in certain situations, that is 1, 2, 3 are there that you can read. Under the above situation, the bank may send the bill on collection basis and finance the exporter to some extent out of the total bill amount. The amount advanced will be liquidated out of the export proceeds of the export bill and the balance paid to the exporter. So this one, if you know about the bills for collection, bills sent for collection. So there will be no deduction in this. This bill will be sent and will be kept with the bank, and the bank on the due date will collect the amount, and then it will be credited to the exporter. So this is regarding advance against bills sent on collection. Except in this, there are different other things like advance against goods, that is in 8.4.4. Sometimes exports are effected on consignment basis. I told you what is a consignment. In such condition, payment is receivable only after the sale of goods. So goods are exported at the risk of the exporter for sale. Only when this will be sold by the agent there in the foreign countries, then you will realize the cash. Then coming to 8.4.5, that is advance against export incentives. Then there are others also, advance against undrawn balances, advance against retention money, then post shipment export credit guarantee and export finance guarantee, then post shipment credit on foreign currency. So these are various types of credit available to the exporter. Now we'll be coming to 8.5, that is exports under deferred payment. Deferred payment means when the payment is due, it may be deferred for 1 month or 2 months, some period. So that is called deferred payment. If I owe money to be given today itself, but I do not have the requisite amount of money with me, I can request you to defer it. So if it will be deferred for 2 months, after 2 months only the due date will come, and I will have to pay at that time. So I get the concession for these 2 months. So now we'll be coming to 8.5, that is exports under deferred payment. So you have learned that all export proceeds must be surrendered to an authorized dealer within 180 days. I have already told you 180 days is the limit from the date of shipment. Exporters are required to obtain permission from the Reserve Bank of India through authorized dealers in the event of non-realization of export proceeds within the prescribed period. If within that period it is not collected, then through agents we can approach the Reserve Bank of India. However, realizing the special needs of exports of engineering goods and projects, the Reserve Bank has formulated special schemes permitting deferred credit arrangements. This will enable realization of export proceeds over a period exceeding 6 months. Hence, contracts for export of goods and services against payment to be secured partly or fully beyond 180 days are treated as deferred payment exports. Beyond 180 days means it will be called deferred payment exports. The credit extended is termed as deferred payment term credit. This credit is called deferred payment term credit, more than 180 days. For financing under deferred credit system, a single point approval mechanism within a 3-tier system will have to be followed. So that is all regarding your 8.5. Then coming to 8.6, deferred credit facilities. So coming to deferred credit facilities, Export of goods on deferred payment terms can be financed under supplier's credit or buyer's credit. Let us first understand what they are. What is supplier's credit and what is buyer's credit? Supplier's credit is when the exporter extends credit directly to the overseas buyer and seeks refinance from commercial banks or Exim Bank. It is called supplier's credit because the lien is on the supplier. Then buyer's credit is a loan extended by financial institution or a consortium of financial institutions to the overseas buyer for financing a particular contract. Let us discuss buyer's credit in detail. So this is supplier's credit and buyer's credit. Then there are some details of this buyer's credit also. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4 types of credit worthiness of the. So these are the while considering proposal under the scheme, the following factors are taken into account by Exim Bank. That is competence and capability of Indian exporters, then justifiability of contract, economic viability of the overseas project, and credit worthiness of the foreign borrower or foreign buyer. So these are all required by Exim Bank. Now, when we are talking about Exim Bank, that is Export and Import Bank, we'll come to the role of Export Import Bank of India in 8.7. So, what are the works or functions it is done by, or it is worked out by the Exim Bank? First one is export, then finance, then services, research and analysis. So first one is export. Export Import Bank of India was set up in 1992 for the purpose of financing, facilitating and promoting foreign trade of India. It is the principal financial institution in the country for coordinating working of institutions engaged in financing exports and imports. The major functions of Exim Bank are as follows. Number one is finance. The present focus on Exim Bank is on export finance. The bank finances export of Indian machinery, manufactured goods, consultancy and technology services on deferred payment terms. Exim Bank finance is also available at export production stages. So this is regarding the finance function of Exim Bank. Now coming to the services. Exim Bank provides information, advisory services to enable exporters to evaluate the international risks, export opportunities and competitiveness. Whether you will choose it or not, on the basis of these information and advisory services provided by the Exim Bank, you can decide. You can evaluate the projects. There is international risk, export opportunities and competitiveness. These informations are regarding this. Then research and analysis. Research and analysis. Research and analysis carried out on specific industry subsectors with export potential and international trade related subjects are provided to exporters. Okay, so these are given functions of the Exim Bank. So a table has been given, you can go through that table. Then now we'll come to the last part of it, that is recent development in export financing. Offer of attractive credit terms is a crucial factor in winning export contracts. Hence, financial institutions are offering several innovative financial services to exporters. Some of these services are factoring, then forfeiting, etc. Now, what is this factoring? Factoring is an attractive way of providing export finance to exporters. In this system, factor bears the complete credit risk. Factor is a person or an institution or an agency who is a factor. A factor is a special type of agent who, depending upon the type of agreement, offers a variety of services. These services include coverage of credit risk, collection of export proceeds, maintenance of accounts receivables and advance of funds, purchase of receivables of its clients without recourse is the most important service of the factor. A big advantage to the exporter is that it is without recourse financing. This means that the risk of non-payment by the importer is to be borne entirely by the factor. The factor is a middleman. So the middleman undertakes the risk. If the exporter does not give the amount, it will have to give the amount. For this, they will be naturally charging something, that commission, etc. Now we come to the other thing, that is your forfeiting. Forfeiting refers to the non-recourse discounting of export receivables. Non-recourse discounting of export receivables. It is a mechanism of financing exports that involves less risks and enhances international competitiveness. It converts a credit sale into cash sale for an exporter. In this system, forfeiting agency discounts international trade receivables of the exporter. Suppose you have got one contract to export 1 lakh rupees or 1 pound worth one contract. That will be discounted by the forfeiter, say at 10%. 10% means it will be coming to 1 lakh, means it will be 1,000, 1%. 10% means 10,000. So 10,000 rupees will be deducted and you will be getting 90,000. Sorry, 90,000 pounds. In this system, forfeiting agency discounts international trade receivables of the exporter. The forfeiter pays the exporter in cash and undertakes the risk associated with the export deal. The exporter surrenders without recourse to him his rights to claim for payment on goods delivered to an importer. So the importer will give the amount to the forfeiting agency because this right has been surrendered or sold to the forfeiting agency, who will give you cash immediately, and of course some amount will be deducted as his commission. So this is called forfeiting. Okay, so with this we conclude this unit 8, that is regarding export financing. Now we come to export credit insurance in unit 9. So far as unit 9 is concerned, it deals with export credit insurance. And what are the objects or objectives of reading this unit? After studying this unit, you should be able to explain the meaning of credit risk, describe various types of policies issued by ECGC, explain the principles of ECGC operation, then describe the procedure of taking a policy, explain the procedure for making a claim, and explain the financial guarantees provided by ECGC. Coming to the introduction, that is in 9.1, export business is very risky. insolvency is in increasing trend. So if the importer will be insolvent, where from will be getting your money? So that is risky. Balance of payment is a problem with many countries. Balance of payment means they do not have sufficient foreign exchange to give. Then export credit insurance is the remedy for all these things. We'll read various types of cover by ECGC and basic principle of its operation in this unit. We'll also discuss the procedure for making a claim and financial guarantees provided to banks. So first of all, coming to meaning of credit risk. There is deep competition to export by different countries. Indian exporters have to compete with others in respect of not only quality, price, and delivery schedule, but also in payment terms. While offering more lucrative payment offers, the risk also increases. Insolvency of importer and other regions are there. You cannot be too much choosy or cautious because opportunity will slip away from your hands. Thus, credit risk is unavoidable, especially in case of export business. Now in 9.3, you are having organizations covering credit risk. What are the organizations which cover the credit risks? There are more than 40 such organizations who cover the credit risk throughout the world. Working under a union, they have got a union called International Union of Credit and Investment Insurers. Popularly, they are known as BERN, B-E-R-N-E Union, BERN Union. In India, we have Export Credit Guarantee Corporation of India, that is ECGC. This is important to remember. What is ECGC? Export Credit Guarantee Corporation of India. This is a government of India enterprise. It is wholly owned by the government of India. In 1964, ECGC Corporation Limited took over from Export Risk Insurance Corporation, founded in 1957. Actually, in 1957, first of all, this Export Risk Insurance Corporation was established for this work. In 1964, however, ECGC, that is Export Credit Guarantee Corporation Limited, was formed, which took over the business from them. But again, to give them an Indian name, the emphasis of India or government of India involved in it, it was renamed as ECGC of India Limited. That is in 1983. It is a wholly owned government company under the Ministry of Commerce. The board of directors of this company represent government, banking, insurance, trade, and industry, etc. So, people from all branches represent to become the directors of the board of directors of ECGC. Then what are the types of cover issued by ECGC? Broadly, there are 4 groups. We'll come to that in detail. So these are the 4 types. The covers issued by ECGC can be broadly divided into 4 groups. First one is standard policies issued to exporters to protect them against payment risks involved in exports on short-term credit, only short-term credit. Then second one is specific policies designed to protect Indian firm against payment risk involved in 3 things. One is export on deferred terms of payment, services rendered to foreign parties, and number 3, construction works and turnkey projects undertaken abroad. Then number 3, third type of cover is, or third group of cover is financial guarantee issued to banks in India to protect them from risk of loss involved in their extending financial support to exporters at the pre-shipment as well as post-shipment stages. And the fourth one is special schemes, which transfer guarantee being meant to protect banks which add confirmation to letters of credit opened by foreign banks. Insurance cover for buyer's credit, line of credit, overseas investment insurance, and exchange fluctuation risk insurance. So these are all called the different groups of services. Now, there are four types of policy as I told you. This is under the standard policies. Then there are specific standard policies you have got shipments, comprehensive risk policy, another is shipment political risk policy, another is contracts, comprehensive risk policy, another is contracts, political risk policy. So these are the four types of standard policies which are there. Then we'll be coming to specific policies. So 9.4.1 is standard policies. Under this, we are reading all these things, and only service policies we have to get. So service policies, these policies offer protection to Indian firms against such payment risks. There are four types of risks involved. Just now we have discussed. Then we'll be coming to this is all regarding standard policies. There is specific policies. Specific policies. Specific policy for supply contracts. This policy may take any of the following four forms. There are four forms. Let us read that. First one is specific shipment. Another is specific shipment, that is comprehensive risk. Another is specific shipment, political risk. Another is specific contracts, comprehensive risk. And another is specific contract, political risk. Just like the standard policies, there are also four types here. Then we'll come to construction work policies. So these construction work policies has been designed to Indian contractors who executes a civil construction job abroad. This policy protects the contractor from 85% of the losses that may be sustained by him due to various risks. Various risks, political, then insolvency, etc., etc. These are there. So up to 85% of the losses will be covered by this. Now we come to 9.5, that is basic principle of ECGC operations. There are two basic principles. One is spread of risk and the other is the co-insurer. That is up to 90% only. So here, spread of risk will be done like this. When you will be availing this opportunity, you have to go for all your projects at a time that is, an exporter is required to ensure all the shipments that may be made by him during the next 2 years. So if there is loss in one, profit in other, it can be compensated. So this is the idea behind spread of risk, this method. Then the second one is an exporter is a co-insurer. That means what is the function of the insurance company? To cover the risk. But here, some portion of the risk will be covered by yourself, an exporter, as an exporter. So here, ECGC normally pays only 90% of the losses on account of political or commercial risks. In the event of loss due to repudiation of contractual obligation by the buyer, ECGC indemnifies the exporter up to 90% of the loss. In this situation, a final and enforceable decree against the overseas buyer is obtained in a competent court of law in the buyer's country. The corporation, at its discretion, may waive such legal action where it is satisfied that such legal action is not worthwhile. In such cases, losses are indemnified up to 90%. So this is regarding the basic principles. Now we'll come to procedure for taking a policy. Procedures for taking a policy, that is given in 9.6. So first of all, an intending exporter should fill in a proposal form, that is form number 121. This will be examined of the proposed by ECGC officials. So this proposal will be examined by the ECGC officials. Then they send it and it is accepted with some terms and conditions by the exporter, and the amount of premium is fixed, and with the consent and the premium and with the payment, that is a fee which is non-refundable, it will be given to the ECGC. There it will be accepted, means your procedure is over. Then procedure in 9.7, procedure for making a claim. A claim will arise when any of the risks insured under the policy materializes. If an overseas buyer goes insolvent, the exporter becomes eligible for a claim 1 month after his loss is admitted to rank against the insolvent's estate, or after 4 months for the due date, whichever is earlier. So there are two dates. First one is 1 month after it has been received, the claim has been made. 1 month after his loss is admitted to rank against the insolvent's estate, or after 4 months for the due date. After 4 months for the due date, so either of these two, whichever is earlier, will be taken into consideration. Claim is payable after 4 months from the due date, whichever is earlier. So this is the procedure for making a claim. Here also, we have to see some important things. However, in case of exports of countries where long transport delays are experienced, ECGC may extend the waiting period, and claims for such shipments are payable after the expiry of such extended period. So if it is not possible within 4 months, then how it will be done? Then sometimes the buyer does not accept goods or pay for them because of differences over fulfillment of the terms of contract by the exporter. Counterclaims are set up in such cases. ECGC considers claims after the dispute between the parties is resolved and the amount payable is established by obtaining a decree in a court of law in the country of the buyer. So this is another procedure which we should be concerned with. Then procedural formalities, that is 9.7.1. The ECGC has three types of claims forms. One is form number 501 for claims arising due to non-payment of goods accepted by the buyer. Number two, form number 502 for claims arising because of the non-acceptance of goods or documents by the buyer. And number three is form number 503 for claims on account of delay in transfer of funds to India. Claims due to the above clauses should be filed in the retrospective prescribed form. So this is the procedure formalities which has to be fulfilled. Then documentation in support of claims. So here there are 5 types of document. Let me read it out. One is certified copy of the export order, then certified copies of invoices, certified copies of the bill of lading, copies of the correspondence with the buyer. In case of insolvency of the buyer, copy of the letter from the official receiver or liquidator admitting the claim. These are the main important ones, and there are some other. Okay. Then coming to small exporters policy. Basically, the small exporters policy is a standard policy, and it is limited, the liability is limited up to 2.5 lakhs only. ECGC will cover as good as 95% in case of loss due to commercial risks and 100% for political risks. So waiting period for this is only 2 months. This is regarding small exporters policy. Then financial guarantee. That is the last one that I have to read, that is 9.9. So exporters require adequate financial support from banks to carry out their export contracts. ECGC's guarantees protect the banks from losses on account of their lending to exporters. These guarantees have been designed to encourage banks to give adequate credit and other facilities for exports, both at pre-shipment and post-shipment stages on a liberal basis. So 6 guarantees have been evolved for this purpose. What are the 6 guarantees? First one is packing credit guarantee. Then number 2, export production finance guarantee. Number 3, post-shipment export credit guarantee. Number 4, export finance guarantee. Number 5, export performance guarantee. And number 6, export finance overseas lending guarantee. So these are the 6 type of financial guarantees given to them. So this is all regarding your unit 9, and now we'll come to unit 10, that is import finance. So far we have discussed about the export finances. Now we'll come to import finances. So coming to the objectives of this unit, first of all, after studying this unit, you should be able to explain the nature and significance of import financing decisions. Secondly, you can describe the institutional regulatory framework of import financing. Third one, you can discuss the exchange control regulations concerning imports. And last one is to explain various methods of import financing. Coming to the introduction, rich and poor countries alike import capital goods, consumer goods, technology, strategic raw materials, etc. Strategic raw materials are those materials like suppose atomic energy, etc., which is not available here, which is very essential. So these are the called strategic raw materials. Then hence a thorough understanding of import financing techniques is necessary. We will discuss the regulatory framework and related exchange control mechanism of important finance and various methods of import financing in this unit. So here, after the introduction, first of all, you read import financing. What is import financing? Then after import financing, you can go to 10.3, the regulatory framework. The regulatory framework is just opposite of what we have already read. You can go through it and find out the differences. Then number 4 is 10.4, that is exchange control regulation concerning imports. What are the regulations? Here it is being given. And in 10.5, uh, 10.4 exchange control regulation concerning this thing. Then this is financing import under letter of credit. What is letter of credit? We have already discussed. These methods of import finance. There are various methods of import finance. First one is your financing import under letter of credit. The second one is financing against bills under collection. What is bills under collection? I have already explained. Then number 3 is financing imports against deferred payment. Then financing under foreign credit. All these things we have already discussed. The fundamentals we have discussed, and only thing is how it is truncated towards import loans, that you have to examine. Then in 10.5.5, import loans by Export-Import Bank of India, because for the importers also this bank, Exim Bank, also gives some loans. What is the procedure, etc., that you can see. And then with these 5 points, you can conclude, and this is all regarding your block 2, which contains 5 units as we have discussed. Now it is your time to ask any questions. Let me try to answer your questions, if any. Thank you. Any questions?
No doubt, sir.
Okay. Okay, you go through this. I wish all the best. Go through.
सर वन क्वेश्चन सर सर
Okay. Okay.
सर वो जो एक्सपोर्ट फॉर्म है सर
हाँ.
एक्सपोर्ट इंपोर्टर फॉर्म जोटा अछि सर नेपाल
हाँ.
और भूटान को काहे की गवर्नमेंट रिकॉग्नाइज दउनी सर माने जोटा अपन
हाँ, actually that is what happens. Nepal and Bhutan are friendly countries, where we can say
Yes, sir.
where friendly
Yes, sir.
countries, and even you must have known that while going to Nepal, visa is not required.
Yes, sir.
Because that is not treated to be an outsider.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so with
Yes.
the light of this, these are not very compulsorily made for them, because there are some strictures, some difficulties will be there if there will be any restrictions regarding these formalities. That's why these formalities are not there. Okay.
Yes, yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, Mr. Patel. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, hello, sir. It is already come. it is completed, and one question also was asked by some students. And I explained them. Thank you then.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you.
See you tomorrow, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.